Welcome to People in Profit. I'm Kate Moody. This week, we're delving deep into the world of technology and the role that it plays and should play in our society. I'm joined by Mitchell Baker, co-founder and chairwoman of the Mozilla Foundation. Thanks for being with us on the show. Now, you're in Paris attending the Tech for Good summit hosted by Emmanuel Macron. What's your takeaway from these talks? Are the right issues being tackled and in the right way?
A range of issues are being tackled. Overall, I'd say it's a real marker in trying to move the discussion with tech companies forward about what needs to be done, what's the rightful place. I'll say I don't see Mozilla in the same category as other tech companies. We're essentially a nonprofit, but glad to be involved. And I would say the progress from the first year, last year, to this year is quite remarkable in the dialogue. And so last year, President Macron was very clear about tech companies taking a role in resolving issues and that the problems that resolved, technology industry has to be engaged in. And you see some change in that and in the dialogue this year.
Now, in the wake of the terrorist attack in Christchurch, New Zealand, which was live streamed on Facebook, there was a particular focus on trying to contain hate speech, but also broadcast of those kinds of violent events. It resulted in what's being called the Christchurch Call. Mozilla did not sign on to that. Why not?
Because we were involved in the discussion of it, but that the most powerful signatories are the companies or the platforms where that content is and the set of commitments that those companies are making. And so while we are related in our interest in the industry, we don't run a platform like that. And so I think you find that civil society groups in general feel like those are commitments of the big platforms. So we're very much engaged in trying to get to the good balances.
Will these discussions that have been taking place in Paris this week help move things in the right direction?
Oh, absolutely. For one thing, you have the clear force of will of society as shown through heads of state and its governments exerting itself. And that's important because we need society and the commercial sector in some kind of dialogue or tension or dynamic back and forth. And so that is absolutely occurring. And many of the tech platforms, I think, have in the last few years become aware that this is the way of the future. For many years, it felt like everything that technology did was good, and the world was excited by it. And, I live in Silicon Valley, although I think I'm not exactly of Silicon Valley, but we felt it as well. And so now that that's changed, my experience is the technology industry as a whole and the platforms recognize that. So it is also a ripe time to have these discussions.
Now, the tech industry's environmental impact is another issue that's very much on the table these days. What should tech companies be doing to reduce or try to offset their footprint?
Innovate. I mean, that's a classic technologist answer.
Sure.
But you really want a fundamental change. And so reducing footprint is important, and it's some of the things you can do short term, but the real answers are innovation. And so whether that's lower power use or different materials so that the heating requirements or cooling requirements are different, all of those different materials that you use in the system, all of those things are the kind of really long-term, game-changing kind of innovations that we need.
And are people doing that? Or is that really being taken to heart?
That's an area I'm afraid I don't have insight into, what the dynamics are.
Now, in Paris this week, we've seen 45 tech companies sign this pledge to double the number of women on their management boards in the coming years. What's your reaction to that? Is that a good way to go about trying to promote gender equality, or is it perhaps counterproductive?
Well, I don't think it's counterproductive. So we're part of that group, so that might answer that. What we've seen is like slow progress or sometimes even almost no progress in women and underrepresented groups in leadership positions. And so we need to be bolder and more dramatic and more demanding of ourselves. And for example, the state I live in, California, now has added a quota for boards. And we've seen that pioneered in Europe as well. So we do need to be dramatic. And making a commitment is important. Making a public commitment is important. And then doing the reporting, because accountability makes people behave differently. And so you really do have to set a target and hold yourself to it. So I think that's one important element. I don't think it's enough alone. But what you also want, if you could have a set of 45 or 100 companies that had done that and were succeeding and successful, that will be a path to scale. Because there's research that shows that diverse teams perform better. And so showing that research and practice more and more will, I think, make it unacceptable to be non-diverse.
I'd like to switch gears and ask you about what's happening in Kenya. The government there has been enacting laws that require people to submit biometric data, including their DNA and retina scans, in order to obtain their national IDs. What aspect of that is Mozilla most concerned about? Where do you think you can make a difference there?
Well, what we're most concerned about is that the systems are untested, and we know that getting secure, unhackable systems is very difficult, and it usually takes years. And the issue here is that your biometric data cannot be changed. So when we learn how the system is vulnerable, it's not like changing your password. You can't change your retina or your fingerprints. And so it's understandable why a government wants to have the most sophisticated technology in an identity system. And, good for being ambitious, but it's really much too early to engage in that practice because we don't know that we can keep it secure. I mean, we would say from our experience, you probably can't keep it secure yet. And there's really no known recovery for those failures as they occur.
You've expressed similar concerns about the Aadhaar program in India as well. Is Mozilla still engaged with that?
We are actively engaged in that. Mozilla, because we are this nonprofit at the core, we have many global communities, which we can't succeed with the size of our employee base. I mean, you really can't compete against, Google, for example, with our 1,100 employees. So the Indian community is very active, and that's a big part of why we're active, is that the set of activists and community members and public in India who understand the issues is really significant. And so we try to both provide support, but also some of the assets that we can. So we've been involved with that and the data protection law as well.
Now, the Mozilla Foundation issues an annual health report for the state of the internet. Yes. This year's edition highlights, among other things, the need to rethink the ad economy. That's a quote from it.
Yes.
What does that mean, and how has that call been received in Silicon Valley, where I imagine it's not a very popular position?
Well, first I'll say what we think it means by it. So today, we have the luxury of most websites are free of charge, at least you don't pay when you go to use them. And the payment system is that information is collected about you to sell ads. And the more information that is available about you, the more an ad costs. It's not exactly clear what information you need to make it more effective, but right now the system works. The more depth I can provide about you, the more I can charge for an ad that gets delivered to you. And so the engagement model, the way we as people interact, is the goal of that is to have us engage longer and more. So what do you actually do? How many links do you follow? How many do you send to other people? Like trying to keep you involved. And in the early sort of optimistic days, that was described as keeping our users happy, because when you're happy, you stay. But we're learning that the first thing humanity responds to is fear and anger and outrage. And so you can see, there's research on how quickly you get to conspiracy theories on YouTube, for example, that if you really just want people to be active, that these focusing on the negative and fearful and angry sides of human nature is very effective. And so when we say rethink the ad economy, right now we had a set of technologies that certainly looks like the profitable way, the way to keep you involved is to make you angry or outraged or to keep you acting without thinking. And that feels a lot like addiction, which is, bad for a human being and terrible for society. So if you think of the ad economy as a public health issue where this sense of just post something, don't read it, read the headline, be outraged. That's we need a fair amount of research, but some of the indicators today are it's just fundamentally unhealthy for society.
And how do companies like Google and Facebook, for example, they're the first names that come to mind, How do they respond to that kind of a position?
Well, they haven't responded directly to us. I will say they are the giants of our era, and Mozilla, not only are we not trying to be giant, given our organization, we're trying to have impact. But I think right now, there's no question they're way ahead. So although Mark Zuckerberg has said that the future is private. Meaning the model of Facebook that we understand today, that's the current model, but the future is their messaging apps.
Well, he said that, and we're hearing it more and more from people as well, that they want more privacy. They're realizing how much of themselves they've given away.
Yes, and so it will be interesting to see. One question is if we're still encouraging anger and outrage, what happens are they large private channels? We don't know yet that solves all the problems or what actually it looks like. So I think the question of ads is really floating around, but advertising supports a lot of content and media types. If it's not state funded, it's often advertising supported, and so it'll be interesting to see how much of that we can take out.
And there's the balance, of course, between industry and government. Yeah. What role should consumers be playing in this discussion?
Oh, well, first of all, consumers should hopefully, at least in democracies, are driving government. That's a little unfair, I guess. There's nations we might not call democracies where consumer sentiment actually drives government action. So one, not giving up for consumers is critical. So the earlier things we talked about, the Christchurch Call, the change in the view of the platforms, the change in life for all of us in Silicon Valley is driven by consumer concern. So don't give up. That's the first thing. Second thing, on the market side, we are finally starting to see signals from consumers that consumers will pick and use products that either are high in privacy or even privacy specific. So we make a few things that help you if you're using Facebook, for example. And for the decade that we've been working on this, it's been a struggle in the market. And that is beginning to change. And so I would say the other thing that consumers can do is anytime you see a product that you think helps you, try it out and use it, because that's what sends signals to the market of where to invest, where to build a product. And we need choices as consumers. We don't have enough choices yet. So when you see something that looks interesting, at the very least, try it out. Because I'm a believer in building competitive forces in the market is part of the solution, and consumers drive that.
Mitchell Baker, thanks so much for joining us on People and Profit. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to get in touch with your thoughts and questions, and stay tuned to France 24.
Here at France 24, we're taking a broad outlook by talking about the women who are reshaping our world.
En France 24 en español no tenemos temas vedados. Y eso se puede ver en televisión y en todas las plataformas que tenemos en Internet.
في فرانس 24 لا ننسى ونحجز لكم أسبوعياً تذكرة عودة للمدن والمناطق التي كانت في قلب الأحداث قبل أن تدخل في طي النسيان.
France 24, c'est la recherche permanente des meilleurs spécialistes pour vous permettre de déchiffrer l'actualité.
Claro que tiene algo especial, somos todos de distintos países y trabajamos con todo el corazón para entregar información en el momento preciso.
أخبار سياسية واقتصادية وثقافية وأيضاً رياضية بأعين خبراء رياضيين. هذه هي قناة فرانس 24.